Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel for another video review. Today we have got the highly anticipated Celestron Origin Home Observatory here to review for you guys. Now, I will admit this is not my personal unit. A friend of mine pre-ordered his the minute it was announced, and he is gracious enough to let me borrow it for an extended period of time to do this video review for you guys. So I hope you enjoy and stick around because we're going to dive right in to the Celestron Origin. As always, thank you so much for joining me here on my channel. Today we've got a very highly anticipated product for 2024. The Celestron Origin was announced at the beginning of 2024 with pre-orders that started early in the spring. It finally just started shipping here in about mid-July, so they did have a few delays along the way, but they are finally in the hands of people. We're finally seeing them get delivered, so that is a good sign. Now, this telescope is one of the first smart telescopes out there that's going to drive the line of astrophotography for everybody that uses it, whether or not you're the basic beginner learning the night sky or you're an advanced amateur. Anybody of all skill levels can use this and capture really nice images of the night sky. So I know that you've seen a lot about the Origin out there on the internet, so let's get right on into all of the features on this really nice telescope. First things first, what we need to notice about this is that this optical tube is completely different. It's brand new from Celestron. It is their patented RASA optics, except in a 6-inch variant. A lot of people have been wanting this telescope tube for a really long time because a lot of us have hyperstars and some of us have RASA optical tubes, and we know the benefits of really fast f2 imaging. But the smaller C6 that you can get and put a hyperstar on it delivers really nice wide field views that are barely over 300 millimeters, which is usually associated with a refractor. So a lot of people have been asking Celestron for a RASA optical tube in a 6-inch variant. Well, Celestron listened, but they did a little bit differently than what we were anticipating. But they decided instead they're going to make a smart telescope out of it, which is what we call the Origin. So this little guy is the same RASA optical design system. It's basically a modified Schmidt-Cassegrain, except you put the camera up front here at the top instead of in the rear, like you would on a traditional Schmidt-Cassegrain. So this is called a Rowe-Ackermann Schmidt astrograph. That is the official name for the type of optics that are inside of it. This delivers extremely wide f2.2 optics at 335 millimeters. So that is really wide field for those wider clusters and nebulae that you're going to want to photograph in the night sky. As we all know, RASA optical tubes are fantastic, and this one is no exception to that. The fit and finish is just as nice as their other RASA optical tubes. It's painted in this metallic cream paint job, just like the other optical tubes and like their Edge HD optical tubes. The Origin gets that same aesthetic look to it. The Celestron Origin runs off of Celestron's Evolution series of mounts. Now, even though they've customized this one to be just a little bit different than the regular Evo mount, this one just has a little bit of touches to it that just make it sort of Origin specific, such as the little orange accents throughout the mount here. You can see it runs all the way through the handles and over to the other side, as well as the special branding on the side of the Evo mount that says Origin, and then also a weighted Celestron logo here. This logo, as you move the telescope up and down, the Celestron logo will always stay put to the exact same position. The Evolution mount, though, is a really great mount because it can handle up to 25 pounds. It's got really beefy drive motors. It's got an internal lithium-ion battery that allows us to do 6 hours of imaging, maybe a little bit more depending on the temperature outside, but it pretty much allows you to run your Origin all night long without having to have cables set up and snag and lose them in the darkness and all that good stuff. It just allows us to go out, set it up, and the simplistic use of just firing on the switch and letting the internal battery power this beast all the way through the night. The next thing I want to talk about is the camera that's located up front here. This is a Sony IMX 178 chip, and it gives us a resolution of about 3096 by 2080 pixels. So that's quite a bit of resolution for such a small camera chip. This delivers really nice resolution on the photographs that you take. It's got good sensitivity to it, and it allows us to really use the RASA optics to our full advantage. I know that Celestron is working on, in the future, having new cameras that you can upgrade. And for right now, the benefit to just having this standalone camera is that it is so good already. But of course, there are going to be people that want to change out the cameras for different fields of view, maybe get a little bit tighter of a field of view on certain objects, or even expand the field of view even further if they're shooting something that's really wide field. But for now, this is the only camera option that we have on this, and it's a very good camera. This camera does give us a field of view of about 1.2 degrees by 0.8 degrees, which is a decently wide field. The only thing I can say that I would have liked to have seen was that Celestron used a slightly different chip to customize the field of view a little bit, because this field of view is so similar to the ZWO C-Star that it's almost not really that much of a difference. It's just that the C-Star has a much different camera chip in it versus this one. The next really major thing we need to talk about are the onboard electronics that are in this telescope. And that's what makes the Origin so special by itself, is because this is a all-in-one inclusive telescope that you can just go out, flip on the switch, connect it to the Wi-Fi, and off you go. There is no polar aligning. There's no need to put stars in the field of view and synchronize the computer to know where it is. There's no reason for focusing. It just does everything for you, and that just makes everything such a breeze to use. But that comes with the simplicity of a computer that controls everything for us. There is a Raspberry Pi 4 inside of this back of the optical tube. So the primary mirror is back here, and then behind it back here is all of the onboard computers that we need. These are all powered just by a simple auxiliary port that is plugged into the side of the mount here, and with special firmware inside this Evolution mount that runs this whole software, it does everything for you, from focusing to finding the targets to slewing to them accurately, plate solving, all of the stacking and everything all right on your device. But it's all handled through this. The Evolution mount gives off its own Wi-Fi, so therefore it's really easy to connect this even directly to your device, or if you wanted to connect it to your home Wi-Fi system. Looking at the back here of the optical tube, we've got this little LED ring back here. You can see it's white during the day, but at night it glows red. And this little LED indicator is actually, it's a nice little touch to it, because it kind of communicates with you as the telescope is powered on. Once you have the telescope powered on, it'll swirl around looking for the Wi-Fi signal, and then when it's connected, it'll go solid on you. And then when you're doing your astro imaging, this will slowly creep around to kind of give you like a percentage indicator of a ring, and then it'll flash when it's done with that photo and it stacks it, which I think is a really nice touch. So you can not be looking at your iPad for a moment and know exactly what your Origin is doing in front of you. On the front part of the Origin, we do have this nice plastic dew shield here that covers the front objective and the camera from any moisture, bugs, fingerprints, little kids going, "Mom, I want to touch it." This shield provides us just another layer of protection against those various things. And if you want to take the dew shield off, there's two plastic clips on this side and just a little bump out here on the right side. And we push in these two clamps, and we grab that little retainer spot over there, and we can lift the dew shield right off. And this allows us to do some other things at the front of the objective here. So here at the front of the objective, we've got a few things going on. You see the USB power cable that runs down here through the dovetail into the mount, which is pretty cool to provide power for the camera. We also have our threaded collar ring like this that we can unthread. And off comes our camera chip here. And then we also have a filter drawer slider here that allows us to go from being a clear filter, or if you wanted to install your own nebula filter. You just grab the two little areas. It's magnetic, just like Starizona, and this allows you to do 1.25 inch, and if you take off the little adapter ring there, you can see it can accommodate a 2-inch filter as well, if that's all you have. You never want to run the Origin without at least the clear filter installed. The RASA optics are made to provide transmission through those filters, and when you don't use them, you can actually degrade the optical performance of this instrument. So if you're not shooting anything that requires a narrowband filter, always remember to put the clear filter back into the telescope. If you are shooting narrowband targets, though, such as nebulae, you can of course replace that clear filter with a narrowband filter of your choice, as long as it's compatible with f2 optical systems, and that'll give you a much enhanced image. This telescope is equipped with fans that are located here on the back of the optical tube. Right here inside this LED ring, there's a little Celestron logo, and that is a fan that pulls in air using the vents here on the side. And there's two different fans that this telescope is equipped with, one for the optics and one for the onboard computer. Now, it is suggested that you run the fans all the time, simply to keep the temperatures down, and so everything is at a good operating temperature inside of the optical tube, but also because this doesn't really affect your imaging in any way. The testing I've done on this unit, it does not shake the image at all or provide any vibrations through the imaging session, so you are totally fine running the fans at all times to keep the temperatures down. On the right side of the optical tube here, there is a little bump out located on the bottom of the tube here. This little cover, if you pull this cover down, this reveals a whole port of communications down here. You have different USB ports and even an internet cable port that you can connect to. When you take all your photos on your Origin, you can download them onto the USB stick of your choice. Just make sure it's one of the compatible ones listed in the manual for this telescope. But all you simply do is plug it in, and then on the iPad application app, you can go through there and select all the images that you want to put over into the USB drive if you'd like to do post-processing yourself at a later time. This telescope is equipped with dew heaters inside of the front of the objective there, which means if you're getting a lot of moisture, if you take it camping somewhere that's close to a lake and you get some fog rolling in or something, you can turn on the dew heater to eliminate the fogging up of the front objective, which is a pretty nice feature. It also has an environmental sensor located within. If the temperature drops too many degrees that you have set in the app, it will perform an autofocus adjustment, because sometimes when the temperatures adjust either forward or backward, you can have expansion or contraction of the mirrors and the optics, throwing them just a little bit out of focus a little bit. So this telescope will automate that process for you as well. Along with all of the boatload of features that this telescope offers, one of the most interesting things that Celestron has told us about is this AI image editing software that's built in. When you do your astrophotos, which we'll see a little bit later on in this video, you can select different modes of AI help, basically, that will allow you to edit the images in different ways. You can, of course, take images like a pro astrophotographer and do them in RAW format with no editing, and you can do it all later if you choose, or you can have AI do some denoising for you, you can have AI sharpen it for you, get rid of gradients for you, all kinds of different parameters that are located within the Origin's onboard computer. We will touch base on these a little bit later in the video. This telescope is very portable, even though it is quite large. If any of you have an Evolution 8-inch telescope out there, it's about that size and weight for everything. The optical tube is about 11 pounds, the Evo mount is 17 pounds, and the tripod is another 14 pounds. So altogether, it just tips the scale over 40 pounds, but it's still a relatively portable rig nonetheless. Now, of course, if you own yourself an Origin, you need to download the Origin app on your iOS or Android device. And now this app is based off of Sky Safari, and it's a very capable app. It's a really great star atlas. A lot of us have grown to love Sky Safari over the course of the last 15 years since its creation, and the newest version of Sky Safari is absolutely wonderful, and they've brought a lot of those features into the Origin app. You can see it's kind of got the same aesthetic look to it as well. And along the bottom we have menu, we have gallery, we have a snapshot icon, tonight, and we have a search button so we can search any object or comment or whatever it is that you want to take a picture of. But what I want to focus on, at least in this introduction about the Origin, is that all of the advanced settings that we can do. A lot of people know Sky Safari, and fortunately this is going to feel like familiar territory to you. But under menu here we have quite a few different settings here. If we hit menu, we have night sky, one sky, imaging schedules, tonight schedules, show scope controls, recenter the telescope, and settings. Now basically a lot of these are just what it sounds like. We are gonna, night vision turns the screen completely red, like if you were using it at a star party. That is a feature that has been on Sky Safari for quite a long time. One Sky is pretty much a community and a cloud-based software where you can share your imaging sessions and observation sessions with other people around the world. Imaging schedules is actually a really nice function here. This is where you can take objects from the tonight's best list or any other target in the night sky and add them to a list that you want to do some imaging. So let's say there's a star party coming up. You want to add a few targets to that list. You can add them on there. And then when you get to the star party, you can just select run and it'll go through those targets that you want to do. It's the same thing as tonight schedule. If you were just imaging tonight instead, you're going to add the targets. You're going to tell it how long you want to do those targets. So if you wanted to do 12 targets over the course of 6 hours, you can of course set them to 30 minutes apiece, put the objects in there. Or if you just wanted to run one target for 6 hours, that's totally your choice as well. But either way, this fully automates your entire imaging night. But the major one I want to discuss is the settings button down here. First thing in the settings app is your Wi-Fi settings. You can choose to connect the Origin either to just the Wi-Fi that's in the Evolution mount, or you can make the Origin connect to your home Wi-Fi so you can extend the Wi-Fi of the Origin. So if you wanted to be inside, you can of course do that with the extension that it allows you to do here as well. The next one is version and updates. Obviously you can check your firmware and if there's any updates needed for your Origin from there. If we go into the advanced setting, that is where I really want to touch base here, because there is so much on this list that you can change in terms of parameters to make your experience with the Origin a little bit better. You've got everything from the brightness of things to operating the fans to the autofocus. And the autofocus, you can change the temperature settings in which the autofocus completes itself. So if the temperature, drops when you're outside too much and the telescope detects that it's gone more than the threshold that you have set here, it will perform an automatic focus of the image to make sure that throughout the night of imaging, you always stay in focus no matter what. Going a little bit further down, you have control of your dew heater system. If you're imaging from a relatively wet environment, like by a lake or the beach side or whatever that may have fog and moisture that condenses onto the front of the objective. And then we have a lot of different parameters for our imaging session. So we have things like show the live image in the night sky. That's really cool, where the live view from the camera shows itself on the star map behind it. The next button here is AI post-process. That is where you're going to be able to see the image after it's done stacking. It is going to basically do an auto stretch on the image really quick for you so that you can see the final image, very similar to what the live preview would have been. If that is selected off, it is going to basically put the image without a stretch, so it's going to be very dark. The next button is to save the raw images. This is where every single image that you capture during your imaging run for whatever target you're on will save the raw file onto the internal storage. The internal storage, of course, you can download onto the USB stick that I showed you a little bit earlier in the video, where that's located on the side of the optical tube. For me, when I took a photo of the Swan Nebula, every single one of those photos, it's saved as a raw file. So I can go back and edit each stacked photo. If maybe a satellite went through or something like that, I can always get rid of that one frame and stack it manually myself to produce maybe potentially better results than what the Origin was doing. The next one are image stacking replay. This is where you can watch your stacked image come to life. So it'll slowly increase in brightness, very similar to the screen videos that we do a lot out there on the sea star and such, it basically just shows you a really fast replay of the image brightening up to whatever your final image was. It's a really cool little touch that they've added. Now, the next couple of options here are all of your AI stuff, and this is the stuff that I'm kind of on the fence about. Some of it looks really good, and some of it doesn't really look that great to me personally. We've got, the first one is AI deconvolution. This is really fantastic for different objects like nebulae and galaxies that require a little bit of sharpening, because it will actually reduce the star images for you and then sharpen up the image just a little bit with its typical deconvolution. The only problem is you can't adjust the amount that it uses. So when you're doing something like a star cluster, like I did here on M13, it makes it look really weird and the stars are just over sharpened and it's just too aggressive. So it depends on the target whether or not you want to play around with the AI deconvolution or not. The next object we have here is gradient removal. It is absolutely fantastic. Really, really a good tool that doesn't really deliver any poor results. I've never had a gradient really show in any of the images. Now, the last one here is the denoise live images and final images. And the AI denoise is, in my opinion, not that great. It's a little bit too aggressive for what I want it to do. So I have been playing around with the Origin now for several nights, and every single night it gives me relatively the same result regardless of what object you're on. It basically takes all the noise out of the image, but the problem is when you take all the noise out of a photograph, you're actually taking away some of the detail as well. So that's kind of counterproductive to the Origin. It's trying to give you more detail, but yet the AI denoise gets rid of some of it, and I don't really understand that. You do have the option for low, medium, and high. Medium is set by default. Moving a little bit further down, you do also have the ability to take dark frames and flat frames and bias frames with this smart telescope, and that is so cool. That is something that the other guys do not offer. So kudos to Celestron for trying to make it an all-encompassing full astro imaging rig. So dark frames, of course, is where you put the front objective cap on and you take dark frames, dark exposures that are exactly the same length of your regular exposures of your deep sky targets. Flat frames, you're going to put a light panel or a t-shirt over top, and it's basically looking for any dust bunnies, any gradients, things like that in the image. And bias frames are always the shortest exposure you can do with that camera. All of these matter if you're doing manual post-processing after the fact. With the Origin doing all the stacking and processing for you, if that's the route you want to take, you really don't need to care too much about these settings. Everything else now in the app is basic Sky Safari adjustments. If you want to have the sunlight show, if you want to change the background, if you want to change, see your sky from a different location to plan an observing session, all of these are just the basic Sky Safari settings. So I'm not really going to go into too much of detail there. But without further ado, let's get out under the night sky and let's go see how good the Origin could do even from my light polluted front yard. All right, we're finally underneath the night sky with the brand new Celestron Origin here. First things first, we need to power on the mount. We need to connect to the Wi-Fi on your device and open up the Origin app. The little symbol back here on the back of the optical tube, that spinning emblem, is basically saying it's searching for Wi-Fi. So it's still looking for my Wi-Fi because I haven't opened the app just yet. The minute you open the app, it's going to start its fully autonomous features, such as the autofocus and also the plate solving of the night sky. So the Origin will automatically move and start detecting its focus position for the stars that it sees, and then also plate solving the night sky. This whole process only takes about 30 seconds or so. It is super, super, super quick. And that is one of the best features about the Origin, especially for the initialization factor, is that it takes little to no effort at all to get this thing rocking and rolling once you have it out under the sky. Something like the Sea Star, however, takes a few moments to kind of figure out its bearings using its compass inside and everything. But Celestron, because they have different technologies with that star sense technology they've had for a while, they've kind of built the algorithm into this computer program that it's just that quick when it wants to detect the star patterns. So kudos to Celestron for making it so fast to get this thing initialized. So let me open the app and you'll instantly hear that it starts moving around. So at this point, it's solving for the stars to figure out its position. You can see it on the iPad that it's kind of moving around here, as you can tell by the live view. And then what it's going to do is it's going to focus in on some stars. If we zoom in like this, we can see this bright-ish star here in the middle. And you see it did the donut for the out of focus star ring, and the focuser will automatically move that mirror that's in the back of this telescope to find the smallest position of the stars, which means the tightest focus that it can find for us. Once it gives us that indicator that it's ready to go and to start imaging, we can close out the live view and start selecting anything we want from the Origin app. From this point, then we can select whatever it is that you want to see, and we're going to start with M13, the globular cluster, for tonight to demonstrate the simple ease of use. So we're just going to go over here to M13 on the star map here. We're going to select it, and we're going to hit this little button over here on the side. It looks like a little bullseye. And the Origin's going to move itself over to M13. If we hit the live view button, we can see all the stars zooming by here really fast. But it will perfectly center up M13, and from that point, we can go forward and start our imaging run. Okay. Right here is M13 right here in the center. We can zoom into the live view. We can certainly see the live view, the noise pattern kind of fluttering there. So this is definitely almost in live view. And from here, we can start our imaging run by simply just clicking Start Imaging, which is in the very, very center. And it starts by doing 10-second exposures. You can, of course, adjust these manually to be 15 seconds or 20 seconds, whatever you choose. I'm just using 10-second exposures. That is the default, and that's also typically what I run on the C-Star to get the least amount of tracking issues. So we'll take a bunch of 10-second exposures and stack them together for a really nice image of M13. Now, the first image that has come across here on the iPad is actually quite stunning. You see a lot of stars in M13 there. There is a lot of noise in the image. As we continue to stack more and more exposures, the noise will go down and the detail of M13 will come out, as well as more color in the photograph. Now that we've started our imaging session on M13, the goal for tonight is I'm going to show you a few different targets throughout the night sky from my light-polluted front yard. I'm going to do them with 5-minute exposures total. We're going to do just maybe 4 or 5 targets just for this video. And then I'm also going to throw in the narrowband light pollution filter. Now this is unfortunately mine, as I do not have the Celestron Origin branded one to test out. But the one that I have is very similar with the band pass that the Celestron one has. So I'm going to try to put that on towards the end of tonight's demonstration to kind of see what type of performance using a narrowband filter can deliver with this. But for right now, the Origin will ship with just the standard clear filter, which is currently in the telescope. And the clear filter is what's going to be, honestly, the optimal choice anyway for galaxies, clusters, stars with colors, you know, things like that, that a lot of beginners to advanced amateurs certainly like to capture. But for those of us from really heavy light pollution, we typically like to go after narrowband data. So that's where a little bit later I'm going to throw in that filter and just to see what we can get with that. But for now, we're on M13 with the clear filter, and we're just going to do 5 total minutes worth and see what it looks like. We're now coming into the 5-minute mark on M13 here. We are just going to hit the center button, which says End Imaging, and it's going to give us a few different options here. It's going to say either we can discard the image, we can download and save the image, or we can continue imaging if we wanted to continue on with capturing more and more frames. But for this demonstration tonight, we're going to download and save, and it's very quickly going to request the final image, and it's going to show up here on the screen. So it's thinking about it just for a second, and there is our final image that we have here of the Hercules cluster. Now, first things first is I notice it's quite noise-free. Like, it's really a nice photograph of M13, and I'll show you the actual image here on the screen, since I know the iPad reflection through the camera isn't exactly the same. But what we notice here is a lot of the noise is gone after stacking several minutes worth. We also have lots of color in the stars, and we also have even a galaxy or two in the field of view out here on the edges, and right next door to M13 as well, down here. There's another galaxy. So it's really cool that the Origin can see so faint, even from my light polluted sky. So with this, we can either choose to save it, we can choose to share it like on Instagram or Facebook or whatever you choose, and we can also edit it in the app. Now, my experience from editing it in the app is it doesn't really give me the results I really fancy, to be honest. I think the sharpening is way too aggressive. I think the contrast adjustments are way too aggressive. And to be honest, just the image that it produces is usually the one I wind up saving. So for this one, I'm just going to hit close, because that'll just save the one that's on the screen, and I will edit it later in a different app. The next target I want to show you is the Ring Nebula. It's something that everybody knows well, and it's one of the favorites personally of mine and a lot of amateurs out there, because it's one of those objects that you're just in awe every time you look at it, no matter whether it's in a small telescope or if you have a really large telescope and you can see the center star. It's just amazing to see the Ring Nebula in any capacity. But we're going to go to that. So we've selected the Ring Nebula on the app. We're going to hit our bullseye, and off to the Ring Nebula the Origin goes. We're closing in on the Ring Nebula here. We can see on the app it's getting closer and closer on the star map, which is a cool feature. If we hit that live view button, we can see the stars are moving, and right there in the center is our Ring Nebula. So we're going to hit the start imaging button, and now we're going to do 5 minutes on this guy. Now we've reached the end of our 5 minutes with our Ring Nebula shot here. We're going to save this photo, and it's downloading the image right now for us to see what our final image is. Now, I'm just doing this as a quick demonstration for this video, but of course, if you are really interested in capturing lots of detail, you're going to have to let the Origin or the C-Star or whatever smart telescope you're using, or even your big imaging rig. Of course, a lot of us that do imaging with our big rigs, we know that the more data you collect, the better resolution you're going to achieve. And the Origin is going to be no different. It will give you quick, electronically assisted views, of course. By doing this, you're going to see objects far better than what you're going to see with your eyes, even with really large telescopes from dark skies. And that is what the Origin is really made for, is that it can give you a sense of observing things in a new way. But for this image of the Ring Nebula, we certainly have lots of stars in the field. We've got our ring nice and centered, and we even have a little peek of that galaxy that's right next to the Ring Nebula right here, which is really, really cool, because that galaxy is really super faint. But it also helps when you have optics that are f2, because it's pulling in so much light for us. So the next target I wanted to touch base on was a galaxy from the front yard, and I picked the Whirlpool Galaxy because it's still really high in the sky over here underneath the Big Dipper for me, and it's still a good 50 degrees or so above the horizon, so it's still well above the seeing conditions when you get a little bit lower. And we're going to put the Origin on it again for 5 minutes, and we're going to just see what happens here. It is barely noticeable on the live view screen. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's right here, these two little faint dots right here. I'm trying to angle the iPad so that all my fingerprint smudges don't show up. But these two little dots here, that's the galaxy, that's the Whirlpool. We're going to hope that the Origin can pull enough data through in the 5 minutes to show us the swirly arms of the Whirlpool. And I have to say, I am more than impressed of the detail that the Origin is seeing. So far, we're about 20 seconds away from our 5 minute threshold, but look at the spiral arms that it is showing already, and the color of the Whirlpool. You can definitely tell the Whirlpool itself is cooler than the satellite galaxy, which is absolutely true. If you do long exposure astrophotography, you know that there's a little bit of a color difference between them. But I think that it is absolutely incredible, the amount of detail that even from a Bortle 8 front yard, that it can pull this out. I mean, I have, even personally, in the 15 years I've been in astronomy, I have never seen the whirlpool with that much detail in the spiral arms looking through a telescope ever. So the fact that the Origin can do it in 5 minutes, absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I just think it's so neat that you can watch it zoom across the star map as it finds the targets for you. I think that's such a nice touch from Celestron and the Sky Safari team to incorporate that into this. My next target I want to show you is Albireo, and the only reason why I'm doing this is because Albireo is one of the favorites when you do outreach, and the Origin is probably the best telescope out there for outreach aside from the other smart telescopes like the Seastar, and everybody knows and loves Albireo, the colorful double star at the head of Cygnus, and I think it's really going to come through with really nice color here on the Origin, and I'm actually excited to see what it looks like myself. So we can see it centered up right here on the screen. It's real tiny because, of course, Albireo is such a small target, but again, we're just going to take a couple of minutes just to see what kind of image it delivers for us. Already off the bat, just looking at the first couple images that are coming across on Albireo, you have this really weird star halo, even with the clear filter, which normally I would associate the star halo with a narrowband filter, because if you're using something like a Hyperstar or a Rasa, certain nebula filters can give you these weird halos over the stars. But the Origin seems to have that problem over bright stars, even with just the clear filter. We can see, if we zoom into Albireo, that the star has this super big halo all over it. And that's really interesting because that halo actually kind of blocks out the companion star, which unfortunately that's a little bit disappointing. How many people are going to be using the Origin to look at stars? I doubt it. You know, this is mostly a deep sky imaging telescope, and that's exactly what it's designed for, and that's what it excels at. So now, for those of us advanced amateurs that do a lot of astrophotography, the Origin certainly has a lot of room to upgrade from a very basic beginner learning the night sky to an advanced amateur by some of the manual settings that it allows. And one of those things that we can actually improve is by putting a filter on top of the Origin's front objective here before the camera. And that is going to allow us to take narrowband imaging. Now, this is my Optolong L Extreme F2. This is a new filter to the market as of 2024, and this is going to be a very interesting test to see how the Origin performs with a filter on the front of it. Now, normally you would just use one of these filters to enhance a nebula, but in this case I'm going to do a 5-minute photo, and I'm going to let it do everything autonomously the way we have been all night, and then after that a 30-minute shot, just to show the progression of how good the Origin can really deliver for you if you put the time and effort into a single target. I've got the filter changed out to the L Extreme F2. We do need to swap over down here where it said clear filter before. We need to push that button. It'll say, are you sure the filter has changed? You hit continue. And now it says nebula filter down here at the bottom, which is now what we're using inside the Origin with this L Extreme filter. Before we go to the Swan, I wanted to show you what the Veil Nebula looks like when you have a filter installed. Now, this is the same 5-minute exposure we've been doing all night long so far, and just look at how incredible the Veil Nebula looks here with all the different structure in that nebula. It is just gorgeous for 5 minutes, and from such a light polluted front yard, it's really quite nice. Now, unfortunately, the Origin's camera is not wide field enough to get all of the Veil Nebula like you would on a wide field refractor, but certainly there's no reason why you couldn't take a bunch of pieces of the field of views and stitch them together for a mosaic of a full wide field Veil Nebula. But nonetheless, it is really a stunning image that is just captured in rather a couple of minutes from your fingertips. Now we're going to head over to the Swan Nebula, and this is where I'm going to be doing a little bit more of an advanced process for it. I'm going to do the same AI edited image of the Swan Nebula, and then lastly we're going to finish it off with a really long 30-minute image of the Swan Nebula in raw imaging mode that I can take control of the post-processing and all of the other edits that we need to do to stretch it, for color balance, all of those good things on PixInsight later on. I've got the origin down on the Swan Nebula right now. You may know it as the Lobster, the Omega, the check mark, or just the Swan Nebula like I do. It's all the same target, but I can say that so far, after about a minute, it is just absolutely amazing on the screen here. The color and the star field just looks absolutely incredible with the nebula filter on the front of the objective. Just makes such a difference on the nebulae that you capture. All I can say is we're nearing the 5-minute mark for the Swan Nebula, and the image is just incredible from the front yard. I mean, I'm just astonished by how good the Origin can see through the light pollution. But, you know, it doesn't surprise me with its big 6-inch f2 optics that it can draw in this much light for us. I mean, look at the final image of the Swan. We've got lots of detail here, and we've got so much nebulosity out and around. This is the type of stuff that gets people really excited about astronomy, when you can look at something that you can't see with your eyes, you know, just from a regular city or a pair of binoculars or whatever, and turn it into something that it's like, hey, I looked at, you know, this cool nebula last night, and you share it with your friends, and that's what creates excitement in the community. The last thing for tonight is we're going to try to take a 30-minute exposure on the Swan Nebula. And I can say, as we get close to that 30-minute threshold, the amount of detail and nebulosity that's just floating around the outer corners of the Swan is way different than the image that we had at just 5 minutes. Once you capture the images that you want to download and do all of your post-processing by yourself, you can go into the Settings app and hit Manage Remote Files. If you insert a USB stick on the right side of the Origin's optical tube, either in the USB 2 or USB 3 ports, you can transfer any of these images to that USB stick, which is what I'm doing right now on that image, on that 30-minute image of the Swan Nebula that we just captured. It shows you a little status icon up here with the percentage of how far it's done copying. It's only been a couple of minutes, but it's already almost done with that 30-minute shot. After getting to play around with the Celestron Origin for about a week now, I have concluded that this is one of the best smart telescopes out there, and it probably is the king of all of them that have ever been made so far. Now, while this telescope is really up there in terms of the price point, this telescope does things better than almost every other smart telescope does on the market. It has better automation, it has one of the best optical qualities, it has one of the best sensors on the front for higher resolution than most of the competitors, and this really just is the cream of the crop if you're looking for a fully autonomous telescope out there. Now, while this device is not going to be for everybody, this is the perfect smart telescope though for astronomy clubs and observatories for doing things like outreach and public education, or even with schools, because the ease of use of this is so amazing to just be able to set it up, flip on the power switch, connect to the app, and literally 30 seconds later you can be imaging something in the night sky is truly incredible. The software integration that Celestron uses on the Origin for all of its things for stacking and plate solving for alignment procedures is absolutely spot on. It is the best in the industry right now. I am really excited to see where they take this telescope going forward, and if they come out with more models and expand that technology going forward, because I feel like what they're doing on the Origin is just the start of what is to come for these future products. That being said, the Origin has amazing potential going forward. I know that Celestron's building software in that you can use the wedge and the auto guider to do long exposure astro imaging with this guy, so you can take really long exposures that exceed 1, 2, 5, 10 minutes, however long you want to go with good polar alignment. So I know they're definitely going to expand this functionality than just being altazimuth. But with the onboard computer on this thing, it is fast on Wi-Fi, it's fast on stacking, it's fast to deliver the results that anybody could be looking for in a smart telescope, and that to me is the real winner here. The one thing I can say also about the stacking is that it never drops a single frame when you're doing the stacking. Unlike the C-Star that drops quite a lot of frames when it's doing its calibration during the night, this has never dropped a single frame over the more than 300 photographs that I captured with this. Now, while this telescope is the king of the smart telescopes out there, there are a few things, though, that I'm not really that big of a fan of when it comes to the Origin. One of them is definitely the price point. I think for $4,000, I think you should get a lot more for your money. And what I mean by that is these plastic materials, the non-inclusion of a nebula filter. It's like, why do I have to buy another $150 accessory on top of this just to make it work with this setup? For $4,000, I feel like they should throw in the hard case for you, because a lot of the other smart telescopes that are out there at this price point give you additional accessories and things with them. Even the C-Star at $499 gives you a hard case, and that is worth its weight in gold, in my opinion, for the C-Star. So I'm kind of disappointed that the Origin doesn't come at least with its own padded case for the optical tube and a nebula filter, and also a little bit better quality on materials for this price point. With it being a larger optical tube that's almost 2 feet long and a mount that's another 17 pounds and everything, this isn't really the most portable of the rigs out there. Certainly compared to your big astro imaging rig, this is far smaller and far less hassle. But in terms of the other smart telescopes out there, this is really quite heavy and bulky. I mean, let's just take a look at the C-Star. Here's the whole C-Star. This is how small the C-Star is compared to this entire rig. And this is just one little contained unit, and it's vastly capable and in a lot of the same ways. This has a light pollution filter within it. It has autofocusing just like this does. It has integrated stacking just like this does. But Celestron's definitely takes it 5 steps further than the C-Star does. This device is also not for all kinds of astronomers. Not everybody likes imaging at f2. Even though there are a lot of good rewards with imaging at f2, not everybody is keen on this type of optical design because of star patterns, of issues with collimation, things like that will deter some people from this, and that's okay. And the last thing that I'm kind of on the fence about are those AI features. Remember, I showed you a little bit ago in the video where some of the images kind of looked a little fake. So I feel like there needs to be some improvement from the software side that Celestron needs to modify for the AI processing on the Origin in the next couple software revisions. I hope you enjoyed this in-depth review of the Celestron Origin, and if you're interested in this telescope, please do take a look at it. It is fantastic for what it does for you. It is super quick and easy to use, and I think you'll have a lot of fun no matter where you are with this. As always, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time. Clear skies to you all.